In a world where we can know so much so quickly and be pseudo connected to like literally millions of people, why do we feel so unhappy? This is something that I've grappled with for myself for honestly a really long time. And as I talk to friends about it, it seems to be a through line in their lives too. We seem to be seeking this state of happiness, but it also feels like we're missing the mark. It seems relevant to consider that happiness is going to look differently for each individual. I've also come to realize that it really isn't something that we reach, but it's more of a mindset and a state to uphold. So I did some digging and came across some pretty interesting concepts about happiness and how we can choose to pull the lever on happiness in our own lives. Something pretty cool I learned about was that we can quantify happiness. We know exactly what's going on in our brains that allows us to feel all the variations of happiness: motivation, desire, recognition, familial love, communal love, gratitude, and pleasure. But it's not enough to just know those happiness triggers. We have to build a life that supports each of the values that those neurotransmitters are so hungry for. We have to cultivate a relationship with aspects of life that provide fuel for these various emotions that lead to a happier, more fulfilling life. If we don't create a life that includes what these molecules are hungry for, they're going to find it in empty paths that don't provide deep, sustainable traction towards your own well being. So let's take a look at these six neurotransmitters that can make or break your emotional well being. The roots of happiness are variations of six neurotransmitters in our brains. Dopamine is what fuels motivation. When dopamine links up with these five other molecules, it creates these various emotional charges. If you put dopamine and testosterone together, that's when you feel this state of desire. If you add serotonin and dopamine, that's where we get this like seeking of recognition and pride. Familial love comes from the combination of dopamine and oxytocin, while communal love comes from dopamine and cannabinoids. If you add in opioids and dopamine, that's where you get the feeling of gratitude and pleasure. All conscious emotions are a combination of these six trigger points. And knowing that gives us power over where we can seek our own happiness. If we can't align our lives with these molecules of happiness, we will never move toward a path of true fulfillment. We know that working hard and making money only triggers dopamine and serotonin. And there's zero chance of dopamine and serotonin filling up the other four channels of molecules for happiness. We also know that a lack of social relationships is damaging to our mental health and probably our physical well being also. So we can start to fill in the gaps in these neurotransmitters systematically if we know what we're missing. I know this is absolutely easier said than done. Our lives are often swept away with all the things modern life consists of: responsibilities to uphold, work to do, food we have to make and then eat, bodies to move, people to see, places to go. I mean, I even struggle most days to drink the allotted amount of water I'm supposed to drink or take the amount of steps I'm supposed to take, let alone find time to include things in life that relate to any sort of happiness quotient. But if we can create filters in our lives that allow for optimal enjoyment and align to the six neurotransmitters that exude this happiness state of being, then we can hack our happiness. And that seems like a pretty important feat to focus on. Ultimately, happiness isn't a given. It's something we must continually seek in order to have in any sort of sustained measure. And it's often the mere seeking of unadulterated happiness that we can find what is at the core of who we are, what sets your soul on fire, the sort of people you can be your best, most expansive self around, the values in life that are important to you, and what your real goals should be in order to live a life of fulfillment. First, we have to start by promising to be the biggest advocate of our happiness, which begins with a willingness to be vulnerable and curious. When you seek real, unfiltered happiness, with time, you learn to move closer to your truest self. And honestly, that's the first step in a more consistent relationship with happiness.